In the former site of ancestral sage palace in Laozi Taoist temple, these broken stelae and statues have been standing for more than 1,000 years. Standing now in a desolate environment, they once witnessed a legendary dynasty. That paid the highest respects to her religion. That was the heyday of Laozi Taoist Temple on Mount Zhongnan. In the ensuing 2,000-odd years, Taoists have been looking for the best way to study the unity of heaven and man evoked by Mount Zhongnan. They believe the towering peak is closest to heaven and emits an invisible power that helps them in their understanding. Devout Taoists believe that this invisible power originated from Li Er, worshipped by the Chinese and known widely as Laozi. In the realm of immortals, he was deified as Supreme Lord Lao. Since the appearance of Laozi's Tao Te Ching and the birth of the Eastern Han Dynasty, he has been worshipped as a philosopher of great wisdom. The Eastern Han Dynasty enjoyed prosperity for nearly 200 years, until the year 184, when the peasants rebelled and the warlords became embroiled in a series of local wars. In the face of the chaos, there was one person who turned to Laozi for suggestions on how to restore the peace. He wasn't an emperor or a warlord, but Zhang Daoling, a descendant of Zhang Liang, minister of the Western Han Dynasty. In 186, Zhang Daoling began his missionary career on Mount Qingcheng in today's western Sichuan. A self-styled celestial master, Zhang held the Tao Te Ching in the highest regard. It was also the book his Taoist sect, the Way of the Celestial Masters, took divine inspiration from. This signified the official birth of Taoism in China.
原来一只道教实相就会形成一只实体，它有组织、有原则、有制度、有体制，形成一只教。这个道教的道就还是一道老子、黄老的实相，道家的实相，而跨度了几千年就形成了道教。
In 191, Zhang Lu, grandson of Zhang Daoling, became the second celestial master and worshipped Laozi as the supreme Lord Lao. From then on, Laozi completed his historical transformation from man to God. With the change in Laozi's status, Laoguan Temple underwent a change from the origin of the Taoist school to that of Taoism itself. Before Zhang Daoling founded his own Taoist sect, many had already studied the Tao at Laoguan. With the rise of the Way of the Celestial Masters Taoism, worshippers moved to Shanxi. In the late 270s, the Laoguan Taoist sect took shape, worshipping the Tao Te Ching and taking Laozi as their supreme lord. Laoguan Temple on Mount Zhongnan became the Taoist spiritual home. However, the Laoguan Taoist sect ended up suffering a major crisis of its own. The Western Jin dynasty fell in 320, and the northern grassland tribes flooded into the Central Plains. Devastating wars broke out in areas north of the Yangtze River, and China was again plunged into turmoil. Most Taoists of Laoguan Temple fled the area, with only a few choosing to remain to teach Laoguan Taoist sect doctrines. It is because of these countless devout believers that Laoguan Taoist Temple continued to exist and waited for a chance to flourish once again. Having been torn apart by wars for 400 years, China was unified in 618 with the birth of the Tang dynasty. Emperor Gaozu, the founder of the Tang dynasty, visited Laoguan Taoist Temple that same year. The new emperor's visit reinvigorated a place that had been almost forgotten for 300 years. When the Tang emperor saw the portrait of Laozi, Laoguan began to take on a new luster. In May of 621, Emperor Gaozu of Tang granted an audience with Jishan from Jinzhou. Jishan told the emperor he had dreamed of a white-haired old man who asked him to tell the emperor that he was a forefather of the Tang emperor, and forecast that his offspring would occupy the throne for at least 1,000 years. Jishan also told the Tang emperor that the white-haired old man's name was Li'ar and was a Taoist from Mount Zhongnan. Since the emperor's lineage was partly that of the Xianbei ethnic group, he was in need of a Han idol to massage the public psyche, since the Tang regime had only just been established. In 626, Emperor Gaozu issued an edict making Taoism the main religion in China. Followed by Confucianism and Buddhism. Taoism thus enjoyed its highest status since the Eastern Han Dynasty.
这个道教啊，在唐代是个国教，无论你是否有人对此提出其他的意见，但是这个唐代有一个重要的事实，这是不争的事实，那就是唐代的道士，对道士的管理，它是放在中正寺。中正寺啊是管辖这个皇室成员的这么一个机构。那为什么他放在这边？他就认为这个也是自己的本家，对吧？他把这个老子也看到自己的祖先，所以他在国家祭祀里面你可以体现出来。
At this point, Laozi became a part of the Tang Emperor's lineage, and Taoism became the state religion. This resulted in Loguan becoming a place vital to the royal family. Also in 626, Emperor Gaozu of Tang issued a new edict to turn Loguan into the Zhongshan Palace, or ancestral sage palace, and allocated 70 hectares of land, over 12,000 kilograms of grain, and over 13,000 meters of silk fabric for work to refurbish the Taoist temples. Construction began immediately. The majestic and magnificent ancestral sage palace was completed in just 2 years. Supported by the fame of Loguan, it appeared as a mystical fairyland of sorts. According to the records of the ancestral sage palace of the Tang Dynasty, the architectural complex included Taoist temples with high platforms for the immortals. They formed a heavenly paradise in the mind of Taoists. From then on, Loguan witnessed an endless flow of worshippers and became the Taoist center of the Tang Empire. Loguan was treated as the ancestral temple of Taoists. It was Laozi's philosophy, some 1,000 years later, that graced and glorified these mountains once again. In Jiuyukou, about 3 kilometers from Loguan, stands the Yansheng Temple, almost hidden among the trees. Legend has it that Princess Yuhua, the younger sister of the Tang Emperor Xuanzong, cultivated herself here, seeking immortality. She styled herself as Yuzhen, the immortal, being a Taoist imbued with the thoughts of liberalism and romanticism. The Yansheng Temple, built some 1,300 years ago, had a magnetic attraction for talented poets. They came to sip tea made with spring water together with Yuzhen, the immortal. They played the Chinese lute and enjoyed uninhibited dancing. In 732, the poet Li Bai wrote a poem of praise of Yu Jian the immortal.
玉真之仙人，时住太华峰。清晨鸣天鼓，标须腾双龙。弄电不辍手，行云本无踪。几时入少室，王母应相逢。
The Tang Empire entered its heyday the year Li Bai wrote the poem. It was the most innovative and imaginative era in Chinese history. Taoism reached an unprecedented peak at this time, and Emperor Xuanzang of Tang reaffirmed it as the state's religion. He traveled to worship Laozi in person and, moreover, posthumously conferred on him the title of ancestor of the Xuanyan Emperor. He also lectured on the Tao Te Ching in his palace, in the hopes others would follow suit. In 737, the emperor ordered publication of the Tao Te Ching that he had personally annotated and designated scholars of metaphysics to lecture on Taoist theories. What's more, he made the Tao Te Ching a compulsory text in the imperial examinations. Emperor Xuanzang of Tang renamed the ancestral sage palace as the Ancestral Sage Temple to highlight its lofty role as the #1 Taoist temple. With the new name, other similar temples across the nation also renamed themselves. Taoism entered its most prosperous period in history. Its status remained the same for the entirety of the Tang dynasty. That is, until the dynasty fell in 907. In the winter of 880, Huangzhou rose in rebellion. His army captured Chang'an, capital of the Tang dynasty, heralding its inevitable decline. The Tang dynasty was eventually overthrown, and with the smoke from the battlefields in Chang'an billowing towards it, Luoguan declined to a state of relative obscurity. Over time, the glory of Mount Zhongnan and the prosperity of the great Tang Empire became the stuff of legend. Taoism had been passed down and endowed the mountain with a placid and somewhat introverted aura. The ancestral sage palace has undergone significant modifications when compared to the original one. Only a central axis alongside several thousand-year-old cypresses remains. Rooms rebuilt on the ruins arouse the imagination of visitors. What remains unchanged in this part of the world is the mountain itself. It is here Taoists persisted in pursuing their beliefs for thousands of years in utter solitude.